Good to have you with us. This is the Daily Report for Tuesday, March 29th. I'm Min San-hee. Threats to global welfare highlighting the importance of multilateral efforts to better address challenges on many fronts, including trade. We have more later on the programme. Here first is the pandemic update with our Kwon So-ah. So what is the latest here on the local front then?
There has been a rebound in cases to the 300,000 level, Sunny. Let's take a look at the exact figure. 347,554 cases were tallied as of 12 a.m. And although it does mark quite a surge from the day before, the on-week decline trend is continuing as the number does mark a decline from exactly a week ago. Now, meanwhile, this Tuesday, exactly 50% of new cases have occurred in the metropolitan region, meaning also the rest of the nation accounts for 50%. And what's noticeable is that Gyeonggi-do province, which had been posting the highest amount of cases recently, has been at below 100,000 for the fifth consecutive day. And moving over to the total number of cases Korea has accumulated, that's now at above 12.35 million. The death toll standing at 15,423 with 237 additional deaths added in the past day. And the number of patients that remain in severe or critical condition is still continuing to be at above 1,000, standing at 1,215 as of this Tuesday, but it is a slight drop from the day before. On to our vaccination figures, a little over 1,600 and a little over 5,000 people have been inoculated with their first or second COVID-19 vaccine dose a day ago, and a little over 36,600 have received their booster shot, and that's 63.7% of the nation's population. And there's been an increase in cases compared to the day before on the global front, almost double the caseload we had the day before. Maybe that's due to the weekend factor. 1.6 million new cases, a little over 3,600 COVID-19 related deaths. And those are the general updates I have for now, but I'll see you back in a bit. Sunny?
All right, so thank you for the tallies, and do get yourself seated. Here back on the local front, Stealth Omicron is now the dominant strain, but authorities believe more variants are likely to emerge in the course of time. Choi Min-jung joins me now with details on that. Min-jung, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Right, so let's begin with these concerns shared by authorities here, Min-jung.
Right, KDCA Chief Jung Eun-kyung warned that there is a high chance of a new COVID-19 mutation coming up somewhere down the road. Jung referred to the so-called Deltacron, which is a variant that contains elements of both Delta and Omicron. And she said new variants like Deltacron could surface in the country at any time, given Korea's large outbreak and other regions in Europe, Brazil, and Thailand already reporting such cases. She added, although our vaccines still remain effective, it's crucial to remain vigilant and be prepared to take action in case new mutations are found.
Right, but hopefully those new mutations do not disrupt our daily lives. Min-jung, Korea's tallies with regard to severe infections and fatalities continue to fuel much anxiety, right?
Right, and health authorities say those figures could peak out sometime in the next 2 to 3 weeks, and we're expected to see somewhere between 1,300 and 1,680 patients in critical condition. Authorities predict that the figure will drop sometime in April after reaching its peak. Officials are especially concerned about the rising number of infections among the elderly and the rapid spread of stealth Omicron, which now takes up around 56% of our new cases. With this in mind, authorities are maintaining its COVID-19 threat level at its highest for the fourth consecutive week.
Right. Min-jung, what then is the government's forecast of our daily COVID-19 infections in the weeks ahead?
Right. They're expecting our daily case counts to fall under 300,000 within the next 2 weeks. And they were also optimistic that cases will drop to below 200,000 within 4 weeks. With this outlook in mind, authorities appear to be weighing the option of easing our current restrictions from next week. Under the current rules, gatherings are allowed for up to 8 people, and most businesses must close by 11 p.m. These guidelines are set to expire this coming Sunday.
Right, this coming weekend then. Meanwhile, so President Moon-Yoon has claimed that the worst has yet to come here in the country.
Right, and that also may be the view of health officials in regards to whether to ease social distancing measures or not, because just a few hours ago, an official mentioned there are concerns that another wave could be spurred if restrictions are lifted all at once. Now, what President Moon-Jae-in said on Monday during a meeting with presidential aides is that although the government is easing social distancing measures in a gradual manner, manner, it's a transition into measures that call for individual responsibility and voluntary participation from the public. President Moon also said that the spread of the Omicron wave is slowing down bit by bit following its peak, but said that does not mean the COVID-19 crisis itself is past its peak yet. He added that more time is needed for a clear downward trend in infections and expressed concerns over a rise in seriously or critically ill patients and deaths in the weeks ahead. While saying our vaccination rate is generally high, the president noted our stagnant booster shot campaign, calling on for more cooperation on the vaccination front.
Right, and the booster rate currently stands at 63.7%, you were saying, right? On the treatment front, Min-Jung, I hear Korea has sealed a fresh deal to purchase more antiviral pills from Pfizer.
Right, Korea has secured an additional 200,000 courses of Pfizer's Paxlovid, and with that deal in place, the country has now secured enough Pfizer pills to treat 962,000 people. The country had also previously signed a deal with MSD for 242,000 courses of Lagavrio. So in total, more than 1.2 million courses will become available for use in the country. Up to this point, Paxlovid has been prescribed to 127,000 people, and Lagavrio was prescribed to 500 people over the weekend. The first prescriptions for Lagavrio was handed out on Saturday, and the drug is being given to patients who are unable to take Paxlovid for various health reasons.
Right, and with regard to these antiviral pills, I hear authorities are looking to boost their distribution to those at high risk, given the alarming surge in the number of elderly patients here.
That's correct, Sunny. As Min-Jung earlier touched upon, the number of severely or critically ill patients is on the rise, making up around 20% of recent cases. And an official at today's briefing also noted that 95% of COVID-19 related deaths have occurred among people aged 60 and above. So officials mentioned concerns over cluster infections at nursing homes and nursing facilities, as well as the spread to elderly people within families and in the community. To tackle the rise in cases among the vulnerable senior population, an official stressed the government will prioritize and fast-track the distribution of oral treatments, which, as Min-Jung explained, will arrive in more quantity soon to patients at nursing hospitals and other nursing facilities in a swift manner. Also, regular preliminary screenings for staff and restrictions on visitations are being implemented to prevent a worsening spread at such venues.
Right, and so there are plans, I understand, to expand treatment options for COVID-19 patients recovering at home.
Yes, and more precisely, it's for people who wish to have face-to-face treatment, that is, rather than non-contact treatment. So let's first take a listen to Health Ministry official Park Kyang, who made this announcement earlier in the day.
The treatment of outpatients, which was mainly handled by medical centers specialized in respiratory diseases, will now be expanded to other hospitals and clinics as well. We will also streamline our procedures, allowing medical centers to apply directly for the care of patients rather than waiting for designation by regional authorities.
As of now, 279 clinics are in charge of treating home recovery patients who wish to receive face-to-face diagnosis and treatment, which have been operating since December. The number is expected to grow widely as even clinics that treat bone fractures, for instance, as well as Oriental medical clinics, are all now subject to this expansion. Officials say the diagnosis time and space will be managed so COVID-19 infections at such clinics can thoroughly be prevented. Extra medical staff is also expected to be secured. Now, clinics can submit applications starting Wednesday to join in helping the treatment of COVID-19 patients.
Right, well, that is encouraging to know. Meanwhile, Min-Jung, how are Korea's neighbors tackling stealth Omicron?
Well, China on Monday reported close to 7,000 infections, and this comes only a day after the country surpassed 6,000 daily cases for the first time this year. The outbreak is escalating, with Shanghai seeing record record high tallies fueled by stealth Omicron. Shanghai's daily tally jumped by almost 8,000 in a single day, witnessing close to 4,500 cases. As Hua mentioned Monday, China's largest city imposed a fresh lockdown to curb infections and is carrying out mass COVID-19 screenings. So the number of infections is expected to rise further following the wide-scale testing. The citywide lockdown triggered a 7% fall in global oil prices on fears of softer demand in China and forced a Tesla factory in Shanghai to shut down production.
Right, and also, so we don't often talk about the COVID-19 situation in North Korea, but I understand the WHO has recently touched upon a testing trend there. Tell us more.
Right, Sunny. According to the World Health Organization's data, North Korea has tested much fewer samples recently. In its most recent weekly situation report, the WHO said North Korea tested a little below 4,000 samples for COVID-19 between March 11th and 17th, which is only around 1/4 of more than 16,000 tests conducted between March 4th and 11th. The report does not provide any explanation or theories for the recent hike and subsequent plunge in testing seen this month. The number of people screened for COVID-19 was consistent with weekly figures since early February. So there is a difference between the samples and also the individual people who tested for the COVID-19 virus. And that's a little under 1,300 people who got tested between March 12th to 17th, including healthcare workers and people working in border areas for trade. North Korea, meanwhile, still has not confirmed a single COVID-19 case, but its state media, interestingly, has been recently reporting multiple times on the worsening situation of the COVID-19 situation here in South Korea as well as in China. So maybe those testing numbers have something got to do with the global situation that North Korea is monitoring as well.
Right, I see. All right, so thank you for the latest on the pandemic front. Minjung, thank you as well. See you on Wednesday.
Thank you.
In our headlines on this Tuesday afternoon, we begin with details about the Biden administration's defense strategy and spending to address challenges amid what it claims is a rather complex global security atmosphere. Our Peonji reports.
The U.S. Department of Defense announced on Monday local time that it has transmitted the classified 2022 National Defense Strategy to Congress. The NDS sets out how the government will contribute to advancing and safeguarding U.S. national interests. The defense priorities include defending the U.S. from the growing multi-domain threat posed by China. This is followed by ways to counter threats from Russia, on which the Defense Department said the U.S. will collaborate with NATO allies and partners. The department added that it will also remain capable of managing other persistent threats, including those from North Korea, Iran, and violent extremist organizations. Meanwhile, the Deputy Secretary of Defense, Kathleen Hicks, said in a briefing on Monday local time that the fiscal year 2023 defense budget request of $773 billion is roughly 8.1% higher than the request for fiscal year 2022. She added that these investments are vital as ever, as the U.S. faces a myriad of challenges. Regarding the budget, Bloomberg assessed that the Air Force looks to be the biggest winner. The Air Force's budget director said the budget proposal of $194 billion reflects an 8% growth. Bloomberg also reported that the budget is focused on increasing spending on modernizing the U.S. nuclear capabilities as well as research and development. This includes developing costly new defense systems, from upgrading the country's aging nuclear arsenal to developing new hypersonic weapons. Peunji, Arirang News.
In Eastern Europe, Ukrainians are mounting a fierce fight against Russian forces with a symbolic victory in the Ukrainian city of Irpin. Our Kim Hyo-san has details.
Ukrainian forces have reportedly seized back control of Irpin, a suburb of the country's capital.
We understand that there will be more attacks on our town and we will defend it courageously. Irpin is Ukraine. Glory to Ukraine. Glory to heroes.
Irpin was one of numerous cities in Ukraine that endured heavy fighting. The city's mayor, however, warned of the possibility of renewed Russian attacks. The news comes as Russia's war against Ukraine appears to be heading for a stalemate, with Russian forces near the capital being pushed back amid signs of a Ukrainian counteroffensive. Nevertheless, hundreds of thousands of civilians remain trapped in Mariupol in southeastern Ukraine without adequate food, water, or medicine. Nearly 5,000 civilians, including around 200 children, have been killed so far since Russia's invasion began last month. Against such a backdrop, Ukraine and Russia are set for fresh talks in Turkey. While previous talks have failed to yield fruitful results, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky says his country is willing to become neutral in a bid to reach a compromise with Moscow. In relation to the war, the UN chief again called for an immediate ceasefire.
I'm therefore appealing for an immediate humanitarian ceasefire to allow for progress in serious political negotiations aiming at reaching a peace agreement based on the principles of the United Nations Charter.
He added ending hostilities will save lives, prevent suffering, and protect civilians. Kim Hye-sun, Arirang News.
Here on the local front, President Moon-Yoon and President-elect Yoon Suk-yeol sat down for talks at the Blue House Monday evening. Their face-to-face comes 19 days after Yoon's election victory. Our Yoon Jung-min has more.
During their first meeting since the election, President Moon-Jae-in reportedly showed a willingness to cooperate with President-elect Yoon Suk-yeol on the budget required to relocate the presidential office. This, according to Yoon's chief of staff Chang Jae-won, who said there were no detailed discussions such as funding, but the topic came up. The president-elect has been pushing to move the presidential office to a building currently used by the Defense Ministry, but the Blue House had initially raised security concerns.
President Moon said the decision on relocating the office falls on the next government, and the current government will closely examine the related budget and work with them on it.
Chang said the two agreed on the need for another COVID-19 related supplementary budget, but there was no detailed discussions about when and how much. He added the two sides will continue discussions at the working level. The president-elect wants to draw up an additional supplementary budget worth over $40 billion to compensate small businesses for losses caused by the pandemic. Chang added the two also discussed security issues and agreed to make sure there are no leaks during the transition of power. This follows North Korea's test launch last Thursday of an intercontinental ballistic missile. There was reportedly no mention of politically sensitive issues, including a potential pardon for imprisoned former President Lee Myung-bak or specific personnel appointments. President Moon also congratulated the president-elect, wishing him a success, and Yoon thanked the president for the invitation. Along with their chiefs of staff, they met for nearly 3 hours from around 6 p.m. Korea time on Monday evening, having the longest ever talks between a president and the president-elect in South Korea. However, it took 19 days since the election for them to finally meet, with reports suggesting previous delays were due to politically sensitive issues. Yoon Jung-min, Arirang News.
Korea has managed to secure a fairly promising report card from the IMF with regard to its economy, despite the prolonged pandemic. Here's Kim Hyun-sun.
An optimistic outlook for South Korea's economy. The Ministry of Economy and Finance on Tuesday released the final results of the International Monetary Fund's annual Article 4 consultation, where a team of staff assess a country's economic situation and policies. The IMF rated South Korea's comprehensive policies highly for minimizing long-term damage from the pandemic and pushing for a speedy recovery. The IMF also projected growth to be robust, supply bottlenecks to be resolved, and the economy to quickly bounce back after the first quarter of this year. South Korea's projected GDP growth for 2022 stands at 3%. But not all experts were on the same page about this rosy outlook, especially as prices are predicted to increase by 2.5%.
It's hard to say that the economy is recovering because there's the base effect. For the GDP growth, it may be achievable, but with prices and interest rates rising, people might not be able to feel it.
As point of improvement, the IMF mentioned South Korea's uneven recovery. Labor markets, some service sectors, and consumption have been slow to return to pre-pandemic levels. Global uncertainties could also increase the risk of stagflation. In order to combat these problems effectively, the IMF had several suggestions. They recommended that Korea should broaden the tax base and reform pensions. They further advised Korea to push through the Korea New Deal policy to foster growth and inclusion. And they recommended bringing down entry barriers in the labor market and encouraging female participation in the labor force to further promote inclusiveness. Finally, the IMF also praised South Korea's green initiatives in areas such as carbon pricing. Kim Hyun-sung, Arirang News.
Let's take a look at what's going on in the world now. It's the news that the victims' families were hoping they weren't going to hear. But all 132 victims of the China Eastern Airlines flight MU-5735 crash have been identified through DNA testing. According to a civil aviation official on Monday at a news conference in Beijing, the group is now planning for the transfer and classification of victims' remains and belongings. The remains of the victims are currently at Wuzhou Funeral Parlor, while authorities say that the immediate priority is providing psychological and health aid to the families of those who died. A total of 1,180 psychological assistance personnel have been dispatched. Meanwhile, the investigation is still underway to find out the cause of the crash. A deadly mass shooting in Mexico as gunmen killed 20 people on Sunday night in an attack on a cockfighting venue in what is one of the worst shootings since the current government came to power. Officials say they are still trying to establish who is responsible for the attacks. The killings took place in the state of Michoacan, one of the most lawless places in Mexico due to the large presence of cartels in the area. Gang violence has risen to record levels during the current administration, with average annual homicide totals on track to be the highest under any Mexican administration since modern records began. Tesla is seeking investor approval to increase its number of shares to enable a stock split in the form of dividends. According to the EV maker on Monday, the proposal has been approved by its board, and the shareholders will vote on it at an annual meeting. If approved, it would follow the 5-for-1 share split in August 2020 that made Tesla stock cheaper for its employees and investors. Following the news, Tesla shares rose around 5%. Tesla made its stock market debut at $17 per share in 2010 and is currently trading above $1,000. Since their stock split in 2020, prices have surged 128%, boosting the company's market capitalization to about $1 trillion. People are free to enjoy the cherry blossoms in Japan, with thousands gathering in central Tokyo on Monday as COVID-19 restrictions that had been imposed on Tokyo and 17 other prefectures were lifted last week. The cherry blossoms reached full bloom in Tokyo on Sunday, 4 days earlier than usual. Despite the return of people gathering to view the cherry blossoms, the metropolitan government has been asking people to refrain from eating and drinking, even outdoors, to avoid the spread of the COVID-19 virus. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
The number of people who've fled Ukraine amid Russia's invasion stands at over 3.8 million. And this is according to the latest tally disclosed by the UN Refugee Agency this past Monday. Most of them are believed to be seeking shelter in Poland. And for more on their plight, I have Magdalena Hodownik live on the line from Poland. Magdalena, it's a pleasure to have you on.
Good morning, everyone.
Right, now I believe Poland is offering refuge to some 2.3 million people who've left their home and in many cases who've left behind the men of their family back in Ukraine. Do tell us more, Magdalena.
Okay.
Magdalena, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Right, so do tell us more about the plight of the people from Ukraine over there in Poland then.
Well, a lot of people choose to actually come in Poland because even before this invasion, Russian invasion in Ukraine, we had a huge Ukrainian community in Poland. We have nearly 2 million Ukrainian people living and working in Poland. And obviously, because of the cultural reasons, they choose to come to Poland. The language is easier for them to understand more than Hungarian, Romanian, etc. So this is an obvious direction they would take, or to join their families or relatives that are already in Poland, or just the country that is culturally very close to them. And for the last month, we received more than 2 million refugees from Ukraine. Every day they are still coming to Poland. The situation is getting a little bit better at the border. At the very beginning, as we were all surprised by those attacks, Russian in Ukraine. Of course, we weren't really prepared to welcome such a number of people, so there were queues at the border, and the whole situation, even formally, was quite complicated because Poland was still having the formalities for Ukrainians that wanted to cross the border. Now it's pretty much all lifted. I mean, they still need to present a sort of ID to be able to cross the border, but it doesn't have to be a biometric passport as was before. If they wanted to come without visa, and also even if they decide to travel with pets, they can just cross the border with pets. They don't need extra documents for their pets. And so the situation at the border itself is getting way better. And all those people, they are being moved from the border itself to the largest cities in Poland, or even directly to abroad. I've been to the border myself a couple of days ago. So the moment you cross the border, there are buses or even private cars that can take you to Estonia, to Germany, wherever you want to go, whatever you have relatives, they can host you, they can welcome you.
Right, I see. And Magdalena, what can you tell us about the actual journey from Ukraine into Poland for these devastated people?
I mean, it depends where they come from. I mean, for those who already live in Western Ukraine, it's obviously easier to reach Poland. But some of them, they say they've been traveling for days in the very crowded trains, crowded buses. They've been waiting at the border for a couple of days. Sometimes that was the case before. Now it's it's dropping into hours. But of course, they are devastated by what they experienced in Ukraine. They have only what they could carry on with them. So sometimes they just arrive with one little suitcase and then their babies in their hand. Mainly all those people who are arriving are women and kids and elderly people, because men between 18 and 60, they need to stay in Ukraine in case they are needed to fight against Russian troops. So a lot of people are devastated also by the separation of the family. So it's not only the war, their homes being destroyed and the ongoing war in their country, but also separating families, leaving dads, leaving fathers, leaving partners behind to fight. So the journey itself is very difficult because a lot of people are trying to cross the border.
Right.
So this all makes the situation very difficult for them.
Right, I'm sure. And once in Poland, Magdalena, what or how are these asylum seekers from Ukraine accommodated, very briefly speaking?
Well, because Poland is not a really country that has ever been a refugee destination, so we don't really have much of the infrastructure where we can accommodate them. But a lot of Polish people, they just open their private houses. So they offer their homes, they offer their rooms, they offer flats just for Ukrainians who are crossing. So it depends really on the situation. There are a lot of social media groups where they can just offer your house, you can offer your room, and then someone would just pick them up, bring into your home, etc. It's a civil society in Poland. It has been doing a lot to help this crisis ease, let's say.
Right. In fact, Magdalena, some observers have also voiced a bit of surprise and, of course, much gratitude to the warmth of the hospitality shown by the Polish people. How do you explain the sense of compassion and commitment to the people from Ukraine?
Well, that's true that a lot of people mentioning that in 2015, Poland refused to take 7,000 refugees that were crossing the Balkan routes, let's so-called. So we have been seen as a country that would not really likely receive refugees. But in the case of Ukrainians, the people that we knew already, the people that lived in Poland already, as I mentioned, there were 2 million Ukrainians already living in Poland pre this invasion. So I think, and also the cultural closeness to the Ukrainians, we can understand each other even though the language is not the same. But I think, and of course, if it's really happening fire doors, I mean, there was a bomb shelling just 20 kilometers from the Polish border a couple of days ago. I think that the Polish people, they really understand, they really feel for those people. And they understand this is really what they have to do.
Right. Magdalena, US President Joe Biden was in Poland last week. Do tell us a bit about his agenda there.
He came to Poland to greet U.S. soldiers here in Rzeszów, where I am at the moment. He met with them. He met with the Polish president also to assure that NATO is standing with Poland and will, as he said already before, will protect every inch of the NATO land. So this is what Joe Biden said. Again, he said he assured that NATO and the U.S. is with Poland. He also visited Ukrainian refugees. He wanted to see and assess the situation. He also said U.S. is ready to take 100,000 Ukrainian refugees in as well to help Poland cope with the big number of people who are coming to the country at the moment.
Right. All right, Magdalena, thank you very much for making the time to join us live at this hour with the latest on the plight of people fleeing the fighting in Ukraine for safety over there in Poland. Korea faces a host of fresh challenges on the trade front amid mounting geopolitical concerns, including the violence in Ukraine that look to aggravate market conditions amid an ongoing pandemic. For more, I have Trade Minister Johan Gu here in the studio. It's a pleasure to have you here, Minister Yo.
Thank you for having me.
Right, Minister Yo, let's begin with a few words on the gains garnered by South Korea under its free trade deal with the U.S., which marks its 10th anniversary this year.
Yes, I think this KORUS FTA has been a big win-win for both countries. If I use a metaphor of recent times, I think KORUS FTA has been the booster shot for both of countries, especially for trade and investment relations. On trade front, but both countries, over the last 10 years, the trade has expanded over 70%. And in particular, during this pandemic, when the world trade has contracted, but our bilateral trade has increased 25%. I think on investment front, it's more remarkable that the Korea's investment into the United States for the last 10 years has tripled, whereas U.S. investment into Korea has doubled. But more than the quantity, I think the quality of this investment really helped strengthening the value chain or supply chain in critical industries such as semiconductor, battery, electric vehicle, and etc. So all in all, I think that this KORUS FTA has really helped upgrading our bilateral ironclad 70-year military alliance into economic, supply chain, and also technological alliance.
Right, so it has served as a booster shot then. Yeah. Minister, your FTA negotiations between the two countries began in the year 2006, and it took more than 6 years of debates and delays before the deal was sealed by the two governments. Here on the domestic front, I remember covering local news about the concerns over US beef imports amid prior cases of the mad cow disease. What are your thoughts looking back?
Yes, I think also I vividly remember some of the serious concern by our fellow Korean citizens. But I think looking back on the past 10 years, I think many of those concerns were turned out to be ungrounded, unfounded. For example, the beef. I think because of this, the high quality, more affordable beef from the United States, I think, including myself, we can enjoy more affordable, good quality beef, whereas this Korean beef, high-end and high-quality beef, has continued to increase production and price, which means that these two markets were sort of separated. And also on medical cost, I remember that after the KORUS FTA, this medical cost will skyrocket, but it didn't happen. We didn't open this healthcare market to the United States. Last year, Korea and United States has agreed to establish Korea-U.S. the vaccine, a global vaccine partnership, in which companies from both countries really collaborated to really produce and scale up this production of, for example, mRNA, this Moderna, this vaccine which are saving the millions of lives around the world right now. And also on culture. I mean, I also remember there was a serious concern on the screen quota issues. I don't have to repeat, what's happening in the U.S. right now. I mean, all this Korean culture, BTS, Blackpink, and also Parasite, Squid Game. I think because of this increased economic activities between two countries, this people-to-people exchange, and also the soft power of Korean culture became really popular in the United States.
Right.
Yeah.
Minister, earlier this month, that would be the 16th of March, you and your U.S. counterpart, that is Captain Tai, toured the SK Silton Sea SS Michigan site to commemorate the KORUS FTA's 10th birthday. Could you tell us a bit more about this particular agenda?
Yes, the USCR, Ambassador Catherine Tai, and myself have visited the SK Siltron factory in the state of Michigan because we agree that this is the future of Korea, KORUS FTA. This symbolizes the future direction of our economic cooperation and also KORUS FTA. Here's why. I think this factory is manufacturing this semiconductor wafer to be used for electric vehicle. And then this is Korean company invested the U.S. company. So I think it is contributing to really strengthening the supply chain in semiconductor as well as electric vehicle between two countries. And also it is a high-tech, state-of-the-art green technology which will contribute to this carbon neutral and then climate change agenda. And also is creating jobs in the United States, but also it is being put in place in many this electric vehicle to be exported from the United States to many other countries around the world. So I think this has a lot of good stories to share and then really exemplify where our economic cooperation between two countries should go in the future.
Right, the future course of our deal then. Now, for broader assessment of Korea's FTA with the U.S., we share with you the words of Wendy Cutler, who is currently at the Asia Society Policy Institute, but was previously the top U.S. negotiator for the Korea-U.S. free trade talks. Our team here at the Daily Report had the pleasure of speaking to her earlier. Do take a listen.
Well, first, let me just provide my personal assessment, and that is that this agreement has been incredibly successful. 10 years later, we've seen a phenomenal increase in trade between the two countries and foreign direct investment between the countries, and just close ties between different companies and industries. And I think this has had positive spillover effects into our overall relationship. The agreement has also proved to be extremely resilient and relevant and has withstood the test of time. Now, in terms of what the U.S. government thinks, it's a little more complicated, and that's due to not the KORUS agreement itself, but the fact that the Biden administration is following a worker-centered trade policy, and in their view, these traditional trade agreements like KORUS are not really what they are interested in pursuing. So while they recognize the benefits of KORUS and they're praiseworthy of KORUS, I think they also believe that KORUS, like other traditional trade agreements, has exacerbated income inequalities in the United States and hasn't really helped the middle class. Well, my view is we should not embark on a renegotiation of KORUS. We've done this twice. It has been a very painful process for both countries, and it's become extremely politicized. So while the KORUS agreement could clearly use updates, my view is we should not seek legal amendments to the agreement. Rather, we should use the existing mechanisms and the committees and the dialogue structures of the agreement to work on the new issues that are facing both countries. We can also work together in regional and international groupings to address such issues, including the soon-to-be-announced Indo-Pacific Economic Framework by the Biden administration. And then you ask, like, which issues should we be focused on? And I think there's just a range of issues, including environmental and climate issues and their relationship to trade and to decarbonization, to energy security, to digital and emerging technologies, resilient supply chains, particularly in areas like batteries and semiconductors, where we share a lot of common interest and complementary technologies, as well as the whole health area, where we're already working together in vaccine development. But I think we can do a lot more, particularly as we're going to face a new pandemic at a certain point in time.
Right, Minister, let's continue our talk from where the former trade negotiator left off. Now, Cutler has spoken about the possibility of updates to the existing bilateral framework to better adapt to an environment of climate change and health issues like vaccines, as you mentioned. What more would you like to add?
Yes, first of all, I agree with Wendy Cutler that we need to fully utilize the existing framework of KORUS FTA. There are many new, rapidly emerging trade issues, such as supply chain resilience and the digital economy, and also this climate change and environmental and many other issues. So we need to really use this KORUS FTA framework to tackle this new issue. That's why last November, when the USTR, Catherine Tai, visited Korea, we had this joint committee meeting between two trade chiefs from both countries and agreed to enhance the channel of communication to tackle these new trade issues, such as the supply chain resilience, the digital trade, and then carbon neutral, and etc.
Right. And now, again, prior to the program, we asked Wendy Cutler about her thoughts with regard to the future direction of the bilateral trade deal amid the disruptions, if you will, to global order. Do take a listen.
Well, in terms of our bilateral trade policy, I think we need to continue working on making sure KORUS works for the more traditional industries, like autos, like agriculture, and make sure that both sides are implementing the agreement fully. But when we think about working together bilaterally, I think there's a lot we can do together to address many of the pressing challenges that the region and the global economy is facing today. I mean, in the aftermath of COVID and now with the Ukraine war, there's, the supply chain issues have become so front and center. And I don't think they're going to go away anytime soon. There are issues we can work together in the World Trade Organization to see if we can help this organization survive and remain relevant in the months and years ahead. So there's a lot we can do together. And I'm hoping that KORUS provides that basis. We have trust. We have a long history now of close economic relations, and now's the time to take it to that new level.
Right, the next level, as mentioned by Wendy Cutler then. Now, Minister, the Biden administration is seeking to secure, that is, an Indo-Pacific economic framework, as you mentioned, and as mentioned by Cutler earlier on. Korea, I believe, has welcomed this initiative for broader market collaboration. Having said that, what more can you share with us about Korea's strategy in that regard?
In fact, this morning we had a this IPEF related the task force meeting, inviting experts from the private sector as well as academia, business community. Basically, Korean government is welcoming the return of U.S. leadership into this region. And we hope that this Indo-Pacific economic framework could be developed as an open and comprehensive and inclusive and forward-looking positive platform in which a lot of like-minded countries in the region can engage with United States and other countries. Some of the topics that this Indo-Pacific economic framework will try to cover is supply chain and also infrastructure and digital trade and also a climate change issue. And these are the very, very important, the real economic issues that we have to be ready for. So I think Korea welcomed this initiative and is ready to fully and actively engage with United States and other like-minded countries in the region for this.
There are many tangible tasks to be tackled, of course. Minister, where does Korea stand with regard to its efforts to join the comprehensive and progressive Trans-Pacific Partnership?
Yes, we call it CPTPP. Korea has been preparing for this for the last 9 years. And now Korea is ready to submit our official application to join CPTPP in April. So actually last Friday, we had a public hearing and in person, but also online. And we recognize some of the concern raised by our agriculture and fishery community. But I'd like to recall ourselves about this KORUS FTA. What happened 10 years ago with all this concern, and then what happened 10 years from that moment. So I think Korea has this DNA to really turn a challenge into opportunity. And Korea is a country where we really grew our economy by open and then fair trade with the world. So I think CPTPP will provide another big opportunity for many Korean industries and the people to meet the new challenges and turn that into a new global opportunity.
Right. And having said that, Minister, what do you suppose is the importance of multilateral trade deals in modern society, and what role can Korea seek to play, perhaps?
Yeah. Korea is a leader in all these bilateral trade, free trade agreement. In fact, Korea has the 22 free trade agreement concluded with 59 countries, comprising about 85% of global GDP. So we are one of the most the network these FTA countries. But now the big the interest and concern of this global business community is a supply chain. Supply chain is about this regional supply chain, and also with this regional trade agreements such as RCEP, CPTPP, or in the Pacific Economic Framework. I think all these companies can develop this fully this open new we can say the supply chain in the region and as well as globally. So in that sense, we think that this CPTPP or the RCEP and IPEF could provide a new opportunity for Korean companies as well.
Right. I remember you speaking to the media quite recently and talking about the importance of diversifying our markets, right? Minister, what countermeasures do you propose on the trade front, given the possibility of a prolonged conflict in Ukraine?
Yes, we are very carefully monitoring the situation in the Ukraine. Korean government has joined international community and also the United States and other allies in joining this export control measures against Russia. In terms of our exposure with Russia and Ukraine, in terms of our trade, it's only 1.6%, so it's a minimal. But also, many Korean companies have invested in Russia, and also our companies are connected with these companies in two countries through the supply chain in some of the raw material or strategic material. So, we are closely monitoring what's happening, what's developing in regard to this war, and also taking all the policy measures to help our companies to really sustain and cope with this crisis.
Right. Finally, Minister, let's perhaps end, unless I have an impromptu question to ask you, a bit with your achievements as Trade Minister following your appointment back in August last year.
Mm-hmm. It is still ongoing process, so it's a bit early to tell the accomplishment. But what I can say is to really help developing this new framework on trade policy. The global trading environment is rapidly changing, and it's not just about this negotiating trade deal, but also the scope of trade has expanded, including this supply chain, this new emerging technology, and also digital economy and climate change. So I think that I helped this kind of developing this new framework on this trade policy. And also, as you rightly pointed out, all these regional trade agreements such as CPTPP, RCEP, and IPEF, I think Korea has really been active player in developing and collaborating with like-minded countries in developing these regional trade agreements.
Right, and a very short question. Do you suppose Korea's future economically looks bright?
Yes.
Right,
yes,
it
indeed.
does?
Yes.
All right, Minister, as always, thank you very much for your time today and for your thoughts.
Thank you.
Right, well, that brings us to the end of this edition of the Daily Report. We'll be back with more coverage same time tomorrow. Join us then. Thank you for now.